Imagine a world where stone was the absolute ruler. Tools, weapons, utensils, everything depended on the hardness and moldability of rocks. For millennia, humanity honed its stoneworking skills, mastering the art of flaking and polishing. Entire civilizations were built on this rocky foundation. But at some point, the gleam of a new material started catching attention. It wasn't the shimmer of gold, valued for its beauty and malleability, but rather the promise of something stronger, more durable, capable of cutting and piercing with an effectiveness never before seen. This material was copper. The discovery of copper wasn't a single event, but a gradual process, spreading across different regions of the world, beginning around 9000 BCE in what we now know as the Middle East. Initially, copper was found in its native, pure form, in nuggets or rock veins. There was no need to melt it. It could be hammered cold and shaped into simple objects. This technique, known as cold metalworking, produced pieces that were still soft and easily deformable, but it already represented a significant technological leap. For the first time, humans were manipulating a material that didn't break like stone, but bent, stretched, taking on new forms. Early copper objects were modest, small beads, pendants, perhaps some crude tools. They were curiosities more than replacements for stone tools. Yet, the seed was planted. Human curiosity, driven by necessity and observation, began to unravel the secrets of this metal. They realized that copper, when heated, became even more malleable, and more importantly, when cooled, it hardened. This led to the technique of annealing, a process of heating and cooling that allowed copper to be worked repeatedly without becoming brittle. This development profoundly changed what was possible with materials. As knowledge of copper spread, the search for the metal intensified. The nascent civilizations of the Near East, Mesopotamia, Egypt, began to value copper not just for its utility, but also for its rarity and the prestige it conferred. It became a valuable trade item, moving along routes that stretched for thousands of miles, connecting peoples and cultures. The exploitation of copper mines became a fundamental activity, demanding labor, organization, and geological knowledge. These mines, often in remote regions, were at the forefront of a new era, where the quest for mineral resources would shape territorial expansion and interpeople relations. But copper alone had its limitations. Although more versatile than stone, it was still relatively soft. A copper sword would easily bend in combat. A copper tool would quickly lose its edge. The true revolution wouldn't come with pure copper, but with the understanding that it could be improved. The persistent curiosity of ancient metallurgists led them to experiment. They tried mixing copper with other minerals, perhaps by accident, perhaps by deliberate trial and error. And it was in this experimentation that the impossible became reality. Imagine a primitive furnace, maybe a clay-lined pit in the ground, heated to intense temperatures. The metallurgist, observing the glowing orange-red of molten copper, might have added an odd-colored rock or a fragment of a different ore. Smoke rose, the smell of burning minerals filled the air, and then, upon solidifying, the result was different. Harder, more resistant, sharper. There was something almost magical about this new material. Tin, a rare metal often found in copper ore deposits, has a relatively low melting point. When added to molten copper in specific proportions, usually between 5% and 15% tin, it transformed the copper into a new alloy bronze. The discovery of bronze, around 3300 BCE in regions corresponding to modern-day Turkey and Iran, was a colossal milestone in the history of human technology. Bronze was exponentially superior to copper. It was harder, more resistant to wear, had a lower melting point, which made casting easier, and could be molded into more complex and sharper forms. Suddenly, swords that didn't bend, spearheads that pierced armor, axes that efficiently cut wood, and agricultural tools that made farm work much more productive, all became a reality. Bronze production was valuable knowledge, often guarded closely by specific artisans and clans. It was a secret that held power. The transition from the Stone Age to the Bronze Age wasn't instant or uniform. There was a long period of coexistence, where stone was still predominant, especially for everyday tools. Bronze, initially, was an elite material, used for military weaponry, jewelry, and prestige objects. But, gradually, as production increased and knowledge spread, bronze began to become more widespread, though it was never as accessible as stone. This discovery wasn't just about a new material, it was about a new way of thinking. It demanded a deeper understanding of chemistry, even if empirical. It required a more complex social organization for mining, transporting, and processing ores. It boosted long-distance trade, as copper and tin sources were often separated by vast distances. And, above all, it unleashed a wave of innovation that would redefine warfare, agriculture, art, and the structure of human societies. The stage was set for the rise of empires and civilizations, forged not in stone, but in the golden, resilient glow of bronze. The discovery of bronze was more than just the creation of a new material. It was the catalyst for a profound social and economic reorganization. Control over bronze became a source of power, and its production and distribution redefined the relationships between communities. Societies that mastered bronze metallurgy thrived, while those left behind, still limited to stone, saw their influence wane. The need to obtain copper and tin propelled the development of complex trade routes. These metals were rarely found together in large quantities, meaning tin ores from what is now Afghanistan could be traded for copper from Cyprus, or tin from Cornwall in Great Britain might reach Mesopotamia. Caravans crossed deserts, and ships navigated dangerous seas. Long-distance trade wasn't entirely new, but the demand for these strategic metals intensified it to an unprecedented level. Along with the metals, ideas, technologies, and even diseases traveled along these routes, connecting the ancient world in ways never before imagined. Bronze casting demanded a level of specialization and organization unknown to the Stone Age. This wasn't a task anyone could do in their backyard. It required furnaces capable of reaching high temperatures, well-crafted clay or stone molds, and precise knowledge of copper and tin proportions. Thus emerged the metallurgists, highly skilled artisans, holding knowledge considered almost mystical, whose abilities were essential for a community's prosperity and security. They formed a new social class, often sponsored by kings and leaders, and their secrets were passed down through generations. Bronze tools transformed agriculture. More efficient axes could fell trees and clear land for cultivation faster. Bronze hoes and plows were more durable and penetrated the soil more easily, increasing crop productivity. The resulting food surplus allowed more people to dedicate themselves to activities other than subsistence farming. This division of labor led to the emergence of new professions and social stratification, with a ruling elite, specialized artisans, warriors, and farmers forming a complex social web. In the realm of warfare, bronze changed everything. Bronze swords were formidable weapons. Spears with bronze tips pierced rudimentary shields and armor. Warriors equipped with bronze weapons held a decisive advantage over those still relying on stone or bone weapons. The manufacture of bronze armor, shields, and helmets also developed, protecting soldiers and making battles even more brutal and lethal. The rise of elite warfare, with well-equipped professional warriors, became a defining characteristic of the Bronze Age, leading to the formation of more organized armies and the expansion of empires through conquest. Civilizations flourished under the sign of bronze. In Mesopotamia, city-states like Lagash and Nippur became centers of power, developing complex writing systems, laws, and administration, driven by the wealth of metal trade and the efficiency of their bronze tools and weapons. The Sumerians, in particular, were pioneers in bronze metallurgy, using it in religious artifacts, agricultural tools, and weapons that solidified their dominance in the region. Their ziggurats, imposing stepped temples, were built with the aid of bronze tools, symbolizing the fusion of material and spiritual power. In ancient Egypt, bronze allowed for the construction of colossal monuments, such as the pyramids and the temples of Luxor and Karnak. While stone was the primary material, bronze tools were essential for cutting, carving, and moving the enormous blocks. Bronze was also used in funerary artifacts for the pharaohs, as well as armor and weapons for the Egyptian army, strengthening the pharaoh's power and the empire's stability. Copper and tin trade was vital for Egypt, with roots extending into Nubia and the Levant. The Minoan civilization in Crete and the subsequent Mycenaean civilization on the Greek mainland represent the zenith of the Bronze Age in the Aegean Sea. Minoan cities, like Knossos, with their labyrinthine palaces and vibrant frescoes, show a high degree of sophistication, driven by control of maritime copper and tin trade routes. The Mycenaeans, on the other hand, were a warrior society, whose monumental fortresses, like Mycenaean, were centers of military and economic power, equipped with bronze weapons and armor. Greek legends of heroes like Achilles and Agamemnon, though written much later, reflect a society that valued military skill and the possession of superior weaponry, an echo of Bronze Age reality. In other parts of the world, bronze technology also took hold. In China, early dynasties, like the Shang dynasty, developed breathtaking bronze metal, producing intricate ritual vessels and powerful weapons that still impress today with their technique and beauty. These vessels, found in royal tombs, were symbols of power and communication with the divine, demonstrating the importance of bronze not only for practical use but also for ceremonial purposes and social status. The Bronze Age wasn't just a period of technological innovation. It was an era of profound global interconnection. The metal trade networks, stretching for thousands of miles, created a sort of primitive globalization. Distant cultures were linked by a supply chain of copper and tin, and bronze products became a universal symbol of wealth and power. The exchange wasn't just of goods but of ideas, techniques, and people, creating a rich and dynamic cultural tapestry across the known world. The era humanity forged with bronze was not just about metals, but about complex, interconnected civilizations. The Bronze Age represented the peak of interconnectivity and complexity for the ancient world. The trade networks that transported copper and tin were arteries pumping life into civilizations, creating a kind of ancient globalization. From Mesopotamia to Egypt, from the Aegean to China, cultures were linked by this web of commerce, not only of metals but of ideas, technologies, artistic styles, and, inevitably, conflicts. Bronze became the common denominator of an era of unprecedented prosperity and civilizational advancements. A notable example of the rise of a bronze-driven civilization is the Egyptian New Kingdom. Between 1550 and 1070 BC, Egypt reached its apex of power, wealth, and territorial expansion. Pharaohs like Thutmose III, Amenhotep III, and Ramesses II lead vast armies equipped with bronze weapons, including the fearsome war chariots, which were the strike force of their time. These chariots, with their light wooden chassis and reinforced wheels, pulled by swift horses, allowed archers to shoot accurately and lancers to attack with speed. Bronze was essential for arrowheads, spearheads, and the components of the chariots themselves. Egyptian hegemony stretched across the Levant and Nubia, ensuring access to gold mines, copper, and other riches. The New Kingdom's peak, however, also highlighted the tensions of the Bronze Age. The famous Battle of Qadem, fought around 1274 BCE between Pharaoh Ramesses II and the Hittite king Muwatalli, is perhaps the largest chariot battle in history. Both empires, the Egyptian and the Hittite, were Bronze Age powers whose armies comprised thousands of men and hundreds of chariots, all dependent on bronze for their weapons and armor. The battle's outcome, a tactical stalemate, led to the first known international peace treaty, demonstrating the complexity of diplomatic and military relations in this era. Bronze didn't just forge empires, it also defined negotiating power and the capacity to maintain peace. But this golden age wouldn't last forever. Around the 12th century BCE, a mysterious and widespread collapse struck most Bronze Age civilizations. This event is known as the Late Bronze Age Collapse. Palaces were destroyed, cities were abandoned, trade networks disintegrated, and powerful empires such as the Hittite, the Egyptian New Kingdom, and the Mycenaean civilizations were severely shaken or vanished entirely. Writing, in many places, was lost, plunging the Eastern Mediterranean and the Near East into a dark age that would last for centuries. The causes of this collapse are still debated by historians and archaeologists. A combination of factors is the most widely accepted explanation. Climate changes, such as prolonged droughts, may have led to crop failures and widespread famine. Internal revolts and social instability, possibly exacerbated by food shortages and elite oppression, may have weakened governments. The disruption of complex copper and tin trade routes, perhaps due to piracy or conflicts, would have paralyzed bronze production, the foundation of these civilizations, economies, and military power. And, perhaps the most impactful factor, were the invasions of nomadic and migrating peoples, collectively known as the Sea Peoples. Their exact identity remains a mystery, but Egyptian and Hittite records describe them as invaders, who devastated coastal cities and imposed unbearable pressure on existing empires. Armed with a new technology, iron, which was just beginning to emerge, albeit they may have had a strategic advantage over Bronze Age armies. The transition to the Iron Age was slow and gradual, and in many respects a renaissance. Iron was more abundant than tin and copper, making tools and weapons more accessible to a larger portion of the population. Although initially harder to work and less resistant than high-quality bronze, the availability of iron eventually made it the dominant metal, democratizing technology and redefining society once again. The legacy of the Bronze Age, however, is undeniable. It was during this period that the foundations of many civilizations we know today were laid. We saw the emergence of complex writing, the first law codes, the first great cities, and the trade networks that united the ancient world. Metallurgical innovation, starting with copper and culminating in bronze, didn't just create tools and weapons. It shaped humanity's social, political, and economic structure for millennia. It was an era of daring, ingenuity, and surprising global interconnection, which, despite its mysterious end, left an indelible mark on human history. The story of bronze is the story of humanity in its incessant quest for progress, power, and connection. The Bronze Age was a period of incredible transformations, shaping the world in ways that still impact us today. But what about you? Had you ever heard about the significance of this era in the building of our civilizations? What was the most surprising discovery or fact you learned about the Bronze Age in this video? Tell us in the comments. And if you have any historical or mythological curiosities you'd like to see in the next video, leave your suggestion below. Your participation is really important to us as we continue to explore the mysteries and grandeur of human history.